The sound of bare feet slapping against concrete echoed through the humid Hong Kong air as two of the most legendary figures in martial arts history faced each other in what would become one of the most misunderstood moments in cinema folklore. It was March 15, 1973, and the Golden Harvest Studios lot was buzzing with the controlled chaos that only a major film production could generate. Jackie Chan, barely 19 years old and still going by his birth name Chan Kong Sang, wiped the sweat from his brow as he watched the master at work. Bruce Lee moved like liquid lightning across the makeshift training area, his yellow tracksuit catching the afternoon sunlight that filtered through the warehouse windows. The air was thick with the scent of incense from a nearby temple, mixing with the metallic tang of equipment and the ever-present humidity that clung to everything in Hong Kong like a second skin. What happened in those 8 seconds would haunt Jackie for decades, spawning countless rumors and misinterpretations that painted Bruce Lee as arrogant and dismissive. But the truth, as Jackie would later reveal in hushed conversations with close friends, was far more complex and infinitely more human than anyone could have imagined. The day had started like any other on the set of Enter the Dragon. Bruce arrived at precisely 6 in the morning, as was his custom, carrying his worn leather bag filled with training equipment and philosophical books. The young stuntmen and extras, including Jackie, had learned to arrive even earlier, hoping to catch glimpses of the master's morning routine. They would position themselves strategically around the lot, pretending to stretch or review choreography, while stealing glances at Bruce's warm-up exercises. Jackie remembered the weight of anticipation that morning. He had been working as a stuntman for several months, earning barely enough to cover his modest apartment rent and simple meals. His dreams of becoming a leading man seemed as distant as the mountains that surrounded Hong Kong, but being in Bruce's presence filled him with a hope that felt almost electric. The warehouse where they filmed had been converted into a training facility for the movie's fight sequences. Mirrors lined one wall, reflecting the organized chaos of bodies in motion. Heavy bags hung from steel beams, their surfaces worn smooth by countless hours of practice. The floor was marked with tape to indicate camera positions and movement patterns, creating a geometric maze that the performers had to navigate while making their actions appear effortless and natural. Bruce had been working on a particularly challenging sequence that required him to fight multiple opponents simultaneously. The choreography demanded not just physical skill, but an almost supernatural awareness of spatial relationships and timing. Each movement had to flow seamlessly into the next, while accommodating the needs of cinematography and the safety of the other performers. Jackie was assigned to be one of the attackers in the sequence, a role that required him to charge at Bruce with convincing aggression, while ensuring that he could be safely thrown or struck without injury. It was a delicate balance that separated professional stuntmen from mere martial artists. The ability to make violence look real while maintaining complete control was an art form in itself. As the morning progressed, the temperature in the warehouse rose steadily. The combination of physical exertion, bright filming lights, and Hong Kong's notorious humidity created an almost sauna-like atmosphere. Sweat stained everyone's clothing, and the mirrors began to fog despite the industrial fans that churned constantly in the background. Bruce had been unusually quiet that morning, his typical pre-filming banter replaced by an intense focus that seemed to radiate from his compact frame. Those who knew him well recognized this as his preparation mode, a state of mental and physical readiness that preceded his most demanding performances. His dark eyes held a quality that Jackie would later describe as looking through, rather than at things, as if he was seeing possibilities and patterns invisible to others. The crew had been setting up for what the director called the money shot, a complex sequence that would showcase Bruce's fighting philosophy in action. The scene required precise timing from everyone involved, with cameras positioned at multiple angles to capture the fluid dynamics of the choreographed combat. Lighting technicians adjusted their equipment for the dozenth time, seeking the perfect balance of drama and clarity. It was during a brief break in filming that the conversation began. Jackie was sitting on a wooden crate near the craft services table, nursing a bottle of water and reviewing his notes on the upcoming sequence. The other stuntmen were scattered around the warehouse, some stretching, others discussing the finer points of the choreography they had been rehearsing for weeks. Bruce approached the group with his characteristic, purposeful stride, his yellow tracksuit now darkened with perspiration. His hair, usually perfectly styled, hung slightly damp across his forehead, giving him a more approachable appearance than his carefully cultivated public image suggested. He moved with the fluid grace that had made him famous, each step economical and precise. One of the older stuntmen, a veteran named Wang, who had worked in the industry for over a decade, was discussing the evolution of martial arts and cinema. He spoke about the old days when fights were slower and more theatrical, designed more for dramatic effect than realistic portrayal of combat. His weathered hands gestured expressively as he described the changes he had witnessed in choreography and filming techniques. Bruce listened intently, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. His respect for the craft and the people who made it possible was evident in the way he engaged with even the most junior members of the crew. This was not the behavior of a man consumed by ego or arrogance, but rather someone genuinely interested in the collective effort required to create compelling cinema. The conversation naturally evolved into a discussion of different fighting styles and their effectiveness in various situations. Wong mentioned his background in traditional kung fu, while another stuntman spoke about his experience with boxing. Jackie, despite his youth and relative inexperience, found himself drawn into the dialogue as Bruce specifically asked for his perspective on the techniques they had been practicing. As they talked, more crew members gathered around, drawn by the rare opportunity to engage with Bruce in casual conversation. The circle grew to include camera operators, lighting technicians, and even some of the catering staff who had finished their morning preparations. The warehouse, which had been filled with the sounds of preparation and equipment, became quieter as people sensed that something significant was taking place. Bruce began to demonstrate some of the principles he had been developing in his personal martial arts philosophy. He moved with deliberate slowness at first, breaking down complex movements into their component parts and explaining the reasoning behind each choice. His teaching style was patient and methodical, reflecting his background as an instructor and his genuine desire to share knowledge. Jackie watched with fascination as Bruce explained how traditional forms could be adapted for more practical applications. The master's hands moved with precision and control, creating shapes in the air that seemed to follow invisible patterns of force and energy. His explanations were clear and logical, grounded in physics and anatomy, rather than mysticism or tradition for its own sake. As the demonstration continued, Bruce's movements began to accelerate. What had started as a teaching exercise was gradually transforming into something more dynamic and impressive. The gathered crowd pressed closer, sensing that they were witnessing something special. Even the director, who had been reviewing footage in another part of the warehouse, was drawn over by the unusual quiet and the growing sense of anticipation. Bruce's body language began to change subtly. His posture became more upright, his movements more fluid and explosive. The casual teaching demeanor was being replaced by something more focused and intense. Jackie noticed that Bruce's breathing had shifted from normal conversation rhythm to the deeper, more controlled pattern he used during actual combat training. The transition was so gradual that it was difficult to pinpoint exactly when the demonstration became something more. Bruce's movements grew faster and more complex, incorporating spinning kicks, lightning-fast hand techniques, and footwork that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The sound of his strikes cutting through the air became audible, creating a rhythmic whooshing that punctuated his explanations. Wang, the veteran stuntman, made a comment about the impressive speed and power Bruce was displaying. His tone was respectful and admiring, the kind of professional appreciation that one craftsman gives to another, who has clearly mastered their art. The comment was intended as a compliment, an acknowledgement of Bruce's exceptional abilities. Bruce paused in his demonstration, his chest rising and falling slightly from the exertion. A thin sheen of perspiration covered his forehead, and his dark eyes held an intensity that seemed to bore into each person in the gathered crowd. The warehouse had become completely silent, except for the distant hum of the air circulation fans and the muffled sounds of Hong Kong traffic filtering through the high windows. It was in this moment of suspended tension that Bruce spoke the words that would be remembered and misinterpreted for decades to come. His voice was quiet, but carried clearly in the still air of the warehouse. Each word was precisely articulated, delivered with the same controlled intensity that characterized his physical movements. "I'm better," he said simply, his gaze moving slowly around the circle of faces surrounding him. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Jackie felt his stomach tighten with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The other stuntmen shifted uncomfortably, uncertain how to interpret the statement. Was this a boast? A challenge? A simple statement of fact? The ambiguity of the moment created a tension that seemed to press against everyone present. Bruce's expression was unreadable, his face a mask of calm concentration. He stood perfectly still, his body poised as if ready to spring into action at any moment. The yellow tracksuit that had seemed casual and approachable just moments before now appeared almost formal, like a uniform worn by someone who had earned the right to make such declarations. Jackie's mind raced as he tried to process what he had just heard. He had grown up hearing stories about Bruce Lee's confidence, his willingness to challenge traditional masters and established hierarchies. But witnessing it firsthand was entirely different from hearing secondhand accounts. The raw certainty in Bruce's voice was both thrilling and intimidating. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Each person in the warehouse seemed frozen, waiting for someone else to respond, or for Bruce to clarify his meaning. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present, creating an atmosphere that was simultaneously electric and uncomfortable. Then, as suddenly as the tension had appeared, Bruce's expression began to change. The mask of intensity cracked, revealing something more vulnerable and human underneath. His shoulders relaxed slightly, and his breathing deepened. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable to those who were watching closely. Jackie saw Bruce's eyes widen slightly, as if he was suddenly seeing the scene from outside himself. The master's gaze moved around the circle of faces again, but this time with what appeared to be growing concern rather than challenge. His hands, which had been held in loose fists at his sides, opened and relaxed. "I'm sorry," Bruce said, his voice now carrying a completely different quality. The words came out rushed, almost stumbling over each other in their urgency. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry." The apology was so unexpected and so genuine that it seemed to physically impact everyone present. Jackie felt his breath catch in his throat as he witnessed this moment of raw humanity from someone he had placed on an almost mythical pedestal. The transformation from confident master to contrite human being happened so quickly that it left everyone struggling to adjust their understanding of what had just occurred. Bruce's face showed clear distress as he looked around at the confused and uncomfortable expressions surrounding him. His hands moved in small, uncertain gestures, as if he was searching for a way to undo the previous moment through physical action. The contrast between his earlier commanding presence and his current vulnerability was stark and deeply moving. "I was demonstrating a principle," Bruce continued, his voice gaining strength as he found his footing in the explanation. "In combat, confidence is essential. You must believe absolutely in your abilities, or doubt will create hesitation. Hesitation creates openings for your opponent." His explanation came in measured phrases, each sentence carefully constructed to convey not just the tactical concept, but also his genuine regret for the misunderstanding. Jackie could see that Bruce was drawing on his experience as a teacher, using his pedagogical skills to bridge the gap between his intended meaning and the impact of his words. "When I said I'm better, I was embodying that mindset," Bruce continued. "But I realize now that, in this context, with all of you, it sounded like arrogance. That was never my intention. We're all here working together, learning from each other." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Jackie had heard Bruce speak many times during filming, both in his role as a performer and in casual conversation with cast and crew. This was different. There was a rawness to his words, an absence of the careful control that usually characterized his public statements. Wang, the veteran stuntman who had inadvertently triggered the sequence of events, stepped forward slightly. His weathered face showed understanding and perhaps a hint of relief. As someone who had worked in the industry for many years, he recognized the delicate dynamics that governed relationships on film sets, especially those involving major stars and supporting performers. "We understand, Bruce," Wang said quietly. "We all know what you meant." The words seemed to lift a weight from Bruce's shoulders. His posture straightened, but not with the aggressive confidence of before. Instead, he carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who had acknowledged a mistake and found acceptance rather than judgment from those around him. Jackie watched this exchange with growing fascination. The Bruce Lee he was witnessing bore little resemblance to the invincible hero portrayed in films or the supremely confident master described in magazine articles. This was a human being grappling with the complexities of communication and relationship, struggling to balance necessary professional confidence with personal humility. The director, who had been observing from the edge of the group, chose this moment to call for the resumption of filming. His timing seemed intentionally diplomatic, offering everyone a graceful exit from the charged atmosphere that had developed. The crew began to disperse, moving back to their various positions and responsibilities with a kind of relieved efficiency. But Bruce didn't immediately return to his mark. Instead, he approached each of the stuntmen individually, offering personal apologies and explanations. When he reached Jackie, the young performer felt the full force of the master's attention focused on him. "Jackie," Bruce said, placing a hand on the younger man's shoulder, "I want you to remember this moment, but not for the reasons you might think. The weight of Bruce's hand was surprisingly light, but the intensity of his gaze made Jackie feel as if he were being examined by someone who could see directly into his thoughts and motivations. The master's eyes held a quality of earnestness that made it impossible to look away. Confidence is necessary in our work, Bruce continued, but so is the ability to recognize when that confidence has crossed a line into something that hurts others. The strongest person is one who can apologize sincerely when they've made a mistake. Jackie nodded, not trusting his voice to respond appropriately. The lesson was clear, but its implications were vast and complex. He was witnessing not just a moment of personal growth from his idol, but a masterclass in leadership and human relationships. Bruce's hand squeezed gently before releasing Jackie's shoulder. "The 8 seconds between my statement and my apology taught me something important," he said. "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is admit you were wrong." As filming resumed, Jackie found himself observing Bruce with new eyes. The master's performance was as flawless as ever, his movements precise and dynamic. But now Jackie could see the humanity behind the perfection. The constant self-awareness and adjustment that allowed Bruce to maintain relationships while pursuing excellence. The rest of the day passed in a blur of takes and retakes, choreography, refinements, and technical adjustments. But Jackie's mind kept returning to those 8 seconds and their aftermath. He began to understand that what he had witnessed was not a moment of weakness or failure, but rather a demonstration of a different kind of strength entirely. Years later, as Jackie's own career flourished and he faced his own challenges with fame and public perception, he would return to this memory repeatedly. The lesson of those 8 seconds became a touchstone for him, a reminder that true strength sometimes requires vulnerability, that genuine leadership includes the courage to acknowledge mistakes. The story of Bruce's statement and immediate apology would be told and retold over the decades, usually with the nuance and context stripped away. Most versions portrayed Bruce as arrogant and dismissive, missing entirely the profound humanity of his quick recognition and correction of his error. The 8 seconds became a symbol of ego rather than growth, of separation rather than connection. But for those who were actually present in that warehouse on that humid March afternoon, the memory carried a different meaning entirely. They had witnessed a master, not just of martial arts, but of human relationships. Someone capable of the rare combination of absolute confidence in his abilities and complete willingness to acknowledge when that confidence had been expressed inappropriately. Jackie carried this lesson throughout his career, applying it in countless situations where the pressures of fame and success threatened to create distance between himself and others. He learned to recognize the difference between necessary professional confidence and destructive personal arrogance, largely because he had seen Bruce navigate that same distinction in real time. The warehouse where this encounter took place was eventually demolished, replaced by a modern office complex that bore no trace of its cinematic history. But the lessons learned in those 8 seconds continued to influence not just Jackie's career, but his entire approach to life and relationships. As Jackie would later reflect in interviews, those 8 seconds taught him that the measure of a person is not in their ability to avoid mistakes, but in their willingness to recognize and correct them quickly and sincerely. Bruce Lee's apology was not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of the kind of strength that builds rather than destroys, that connects rather than separates. The true power of those 8 seconds lay not in the initial statement of superiority, but in the immediate recognition that such statements, regardless of their technical accuracy, could damage the collaborative spirit essential to their shared work. Bruce's quick apology showed a level of emotional intelligence and social awareness that complemented his physical and philosophical mastery. In a world where public figures often double down on controversial statements or retreat into defensive justifications, Bruce's immediate and genuine apology stood as a model of how strength and humility could coexist. His willingness to prioritize relationships over ego, to choose connection over dominance, revealed character traits that were perhaps more impressive than his legendary martial arts abilities. The story serves as a reminder that our greatest moments of growth often come not from our successes, but from our willingness to acknowledge and learn from our mistakes. Bruce Lee's 8-second journey from confidence to humility to genuine connection demonstrates that true mastery extends far beyond physical or technical skills to encompass the full range of human relationships and interactions. For Jackie Chan, witnessing this moment provided a template for navigating his own rise to international fame while maintaining the humility and approachability that would become hallmarks of his public persona. The lesson of those 8 seconds: that strength includes the courage to apologize, That mastery includes the wisdom to recognize mistakes became foundational principles that guided his career and personal life for decades to come.